Welcome back again to the scientific writing class. Today's class will be about quality assurance, reviewer and editorial process. And I will report from the editor's perspective because I have been an editor for quite some while, whereas the other lectures that is also provided by Inga will be more focusing on the reviewer's perspective or the writer's perspective. Okay, what is scientific quality assurance? I will show you the example how a peer review process really is important and underscores this quality assurance. The peer review process is very important to produce quality work. The peer review is subjecting an author's scholarly work to the scrutiny of others, experts in the field, before a paper is published in a journal or as a book. And the peer review process is the following. So I study something here, I go to the Arctic, collect data, then I write up the results with my colleagues, then I send the paper to an editor. The editor gets a lot of papers and he has to decide, do I send it out to the reviewers or do I send it back right away to the writer? So in this case it's sent to the reviewers. These are the experts in the field, hopefully, that then peer review my article and give the feedback to the editor. So the editor plays a key role here in this process because he's at the central part, moderating between the authors and the reviewers. However, usually these people do not talk to each other. So the communication runs over the editor. Then let's say the reviewers give comments back to the editor. Then the editor gives me these reviewer comments. They go back to the scientist, then they rewrite the paper, they adapt the paper based on these comments. If I do apply to the standards of the journal and the editor, then this paper will get published. It can also be rejected, and would be of course the way forward would be to have a published paper, but many papers also get rejected. So this peer review process is very important to assure the quality of the scientific data, the scientific papers, the scientific world in general. It gets even more complicated. So I showed you the simple way how the paper is submitted to the journal, to the editor, and then it's feedback between the reviewer and the editor. But as a reviewer, I tell you the perspective now how this process is running. So let's say I'm the one who is assigned by the editor as a reviewer. I get this invitation to review. This is an example by the American Geophysical Union. So I get invited to a paper review. Then I have to decide, do I have the appropriate expertise? If not, then it's very easy. I say, no, please, I cannot do this. I can suggest other reviewers. I also often have the problem I don't have enough time because there's many reviews waiting for me, so I have to decline for time reasons. But let's say I do have the appropriate expertise and I do have the time and I don't have a conflict of interest, like this is not a colleague that's sitting next to me in my office or so, then I accept the review. Then I do the first reading, and usually after the first reading I already have to comment, write first 2 paragraphs and give a first opinion. I will show you about this later in detail. So then I decide publisher in principle, major flaw or fatally flawed. So this is very bad. This is already pointing towards a rejection at an early point. But let's say I have the expert advice of publishable in principle, then I provide a full review. So this is just an initial review. Then I provide the full review. I do a second reading, third reading. I submit the review. The review then goes to the editor, and the editor has at least 2 or 3 reviewers per each paper. So he gets 3 of these reviews, expert reviews from the scientist who's hopefully working in this field. So this is the work you will do as a reviewer, where the editor is sitting here and invites you to review and condenses then the information from all the reviewers again. So the peer review, it's mandatory for securing high quality of scientific evidence published in scholarly journals. It helps the publisher, so the editor or the editorial board, many can serve as editors, to assess the quality of the work. Then there's these decisions that the publisher makes based on the reviewer's work, so accepted minor revisions, major revisions, or desktop rejected right away. And it can be rejected at any point in the process. For example, if the editor finds out that you have already submitted your paper parallel with the same content to a different journal, this is not allowed and you could reject it at any point then. Then the peer review process requires a community of voluntary experts who are qualified and able to review. This is something that most people don't know. As a reviewer, you do it voluntary. It's of course part of the scientific work that you do, but there's no, or it doesn't get extra paid or so. And most journals will ask 2 to 4 reviewers to assess each manuscript. So think about how many papers there are submitted every day and how many reviewers you would need. So there's a general lack of good qualified expert reviewers in your field. And then a very interesting process has been initiated, and that is typically the peer reviewers have been anonymous. That means they don't give out their names. So you will never know who reviewed your paper. You can speculate, but in most cases, I would say you really don't know. But now the open peer review emerges. As a reviewer, I can give my name to the editor. I can give it to the journal to be open. I can decide if I want to do this in most cases. But now another new thing has arisen, and that's very interesting, and that's why I would like to mention it. So typically the names of the authors are always open and the reviewers are anonymous. Now this process here, it's called double-blinded, blinded or open review. These are new ways of scientific quality reviews, and I will give you an example of the double-blinded process and later on of the open review. Double-blinded, this is very new, and it's also called double anonymous. I will give you an example because I just got this email, I think 2 weeks ago, that this journal, it's called Environmental Research Letters, a really good journal, now has started the double anonymous peer review. Double anonymous, the same as double-blinded. Double-blinded, that means both reviewer and authors are anonymous. The double anonymous peer review, that's when the reviewer and the author identity are concealed. You don't know who submitted the paper, you don't know who are the reviewers. And why is this? Because it has the potential to reduce bias with respect to gender, race, country of origin or affiliation, and thus it tackles the significant gender, racial and geographical underrepresentation in the scholarly publishing process. So I think this is a really good and new initiative, and I recommend that you look at this journal, Environmental Research Letters. To my knowledge, this is the only journal right now that does this double anonymous peer review process. Some more words about the peer review process. The peer review is very time consuming. It takes about 3 months to 1 year between submission and publication. So when I submit a paper, you submit a paper, this process that I showed you with the looping back between various reviewers, editors and so on takes up to a year. It's highly competitive, so the top-notch journal such as Science or Nature, they accept less than 8% of the articles they receive. So a very little number is accepted in these journals. Of course, this percentage is much higher in the other journals. It should provide a trusted form of scientific communication. You can trust peer-reviewed work to meet certain standards of scientific quality. And finally, it does by no means prevent publication of all unvalid research. So you should still look at the papers with your critical eye. There have been papers in the past, there will always be papers that lack the rigorous quality, sometimes because there was a misalignment between the expert reviewer or maybe not expert reviewer in this field and the paper. So it happens that articles are published, and so remember to keep a critical eye. So there are some elements of this review process that you go through as a reviewer And here are some guidelines that are also provided by the journals. And for example, there's these technical criteria. Is the writing clear, concise, and intelligible? Is the manuscript logical? Very important, I told you before, keep the structures always in the format that we learned in the paper structure class. Is the manuscript logical? So does it make a significant and novel contribution to the field? So if your paper idea has been published already in a different journal or by a different person, likely it will get rejected. Are there any fatal methodology flaws? Are results and discussion soundly aligned? Do the conclusions follow the premise, method, and results? Are all the figures clear and necessary? So you can already see a lot of work is in providing also a manuscript that is according to the formats, is logical, you have neat figures, clear, and so on. So these are things you should know before you submit a paper, and you should correct before you submit your paper. Then there's also ethical criteria. The ethical criteria are important for other science branches. So I don't work with humans, I don't work with animals, but these ethical criteria, for example, if you do laboratory experiments with animals, then you have to consider these ethical criteria concerning the proper use and care of animals. Or if you study with human people, were these conducted with prior approval of the subjects and institutions? Or also, for example, is the information anonymized? As you says here, the manuscript must be treated in a confidential manner. This is, as I said to you before, typically these ethical criteria in my case, they do not apply because I don't work with animals or humans. But for many other communities, you have to consider them, and your reviewer will look at these when he gets your paper. So the review comes with certain responsibilities and also etiquettes, and I list here a few. So as reviewers, we are asked to provide a honest, critical assessment of the research, so as objective as possible. Maintain confidentiality about the manuscript unless you want to be open about your name. As I said before, you can have your name open if you want to in some journals, so then you will be, your name will appear with a paper as a reviewer. You should not participate in plagiarism. You should avoid and disclose any conflicts of interest. That is something important. Like if I see somebody publishing work that I would have liked to publish, but I didn't do it yet, then I should just honor the work that this person has done and not make a bad rating because there's a conflict of interest. Then accept manuscripts for review only in your area of expertise. Agree to review only if it can be completed on time. This is very important, and I mentioned it to you before because we get so many questions for reviews. Like I get maybe 2 or 3 a week at least, and you just simply cannot do them all. Then I should also report suspected duplicate publications, fraud, plagiarism, or ethical concerns, and write my review in a collegial, constructive manner. Basically, as something that I would like to receive, I should also provide as a reviewer to others. Here's a checklist for reviewers. This is provided in one of the papers. This checklist deviates between the journals. So this is just giving you an example what the reviewer should look for and what they are asked to comment about by the editor. So importance of research question, originality of work, delineation of strengths and weaknesses, writing style of figures, table presentation, ethical concerns. And this is the editor's evaluation of review and reviewers. So this is also something that the editor collects the information about the reviewers. For example, how is the review in terms of thoroughness and comprehensiveness, timeless, citing appropriate evidence, support comments, objectivity, and so on. So I like this because basically the reviewer also gets evaluated by the editor. And I, as the editor, had a few examples in the past where I had reviewers that didn't comply in a good manner to these, and then I tend towards not asking them again. Yeah, here's an evaluation sheet also for reviewing scientific papers. Yeah, you can see again here, these are even more detailed points, But this is something that we get also as reviewers, and we have to fill in each of these points for giving this feedback to the editor. This is again from a different journal. Some golden rules and last advice. So the reviewer's golden rule is treat other manuscripts as you would want your own to be treated. The writer's golden rule, always think about how you would review your own paper based on the review criteria and write it accordingly. And it has been very helpful for me to be in all of these positions, so as a writer, as a reviewer, and as an editor, because basically you learn a lot by reviewing others' papers. Maybe this is one of the really important rules you should remember. You really want to treat other manuscripts as you would want your own to be treated. It's not very helpful to be only being very negative, bashing on somebody's work, but rather than giving constructive comments. As I told you before, I have been an editor for the journal The Cryosphere for, I think it was now 7 years. And The Cryosphere is a journal by the European Geoscience Union. So the difference of this journal is that it's interactive open access. And I show you with an example here what I mean with this. This provides you a flow chart of the different interaction modes that exist for this journal. And the difference to other journals is that you have a preprint that gets published on the journal webpage, and it's openly accessible worldwide. And also others have the possibility to provide comments. So this scientific community, meaning basically everybody, can comment on this paper. And so the preprint, once it's published online, it will of course go through the review process, as the scientific quality will be controlled by this, but also the reviewers' comments will be published online. So everything based here, the author's comments, the comments by the scientific community, the reviewers' comments, and the editor's comments will be all accessible online at the end, which makes it very transparent. And I'm going to go with you now through the publishing of this one paper by Stephanie, and just to give you a flow chart of what happens here, the time steps when the paper got submitted all the way to the final revised publication. These were the steps that were done in between. So the access review is I get the paper as an editor, I do a first initial access review, I say okay, the paper will remain a paper that will be reviewed. Alternatively, I could have rejected it right away. But in this case, the access review was positive. I asked to do a few technical corrections, and then the manuscript was posted online. So again, this initial discussion paper was posted online. Everybody could see this. Then the reviewer comments are coming in. So in this case, I think 2 reviewers commented on this. Then the author replied to these comments and reworked the manuscript according to these comments. And then I had to go through this paper again as an editor, because I looked at the reviewers' comments and I still found some errors. So basically I provided a 3rd review as an editor. It was revised again, then the peer review was completed, and then it was finally published. And I don't know how long it took for this paper to be published, but I think from the original submission to the final revised publication, I would guess at least 8 months or so, just to give you a rough idea. So again, a little bit more details, what goes on behind the scenes while this process is running, this peer review process. So the paper was submitted, I do this access review, and I remember I told you before about these tables. I get these tables as an editor for points, comment on novelty, comment on the figures and tables format and so on. So here I had to comment on the scientific quality, rigor, and on the significance, impact. And I did have to also provide numbers. So you see here it's like grades that I had to provide. So this was my first work that I did with this paper. I had to give numbers to these things, and this is all documented inside the journal. And so basically, in this case, I already said, for example, the manuscript is well written and presented. The used methods and the results are mostly presented in a clear and well-structured way. So, and I also, maybe I should point this out here, scientific quality rigor. I had written the note methods and analysis are clearly described and cited, but I had some critical commentings here on the novelty. I already said the paper is descriptive and does not go beyond the standard methods. So basically I read the entire paper and already comment on a very initial state on the quality novel. So I'm telling the authors at this already early stage, you have to consider revising your paper in this direction. Okay, then this paper got posted. This is the first author, Stephanie. She is a PhD student and in Canada. And this paper now is accessible online. You can still access it in this form. Then I asked the reviewers to give me their quality assessment of this work. And you can see the various reviewers that have been posting here. So very interesting here. There's one review by an anonymous reviewer. Of course, I know who this one is because I'm the editor and I'm communicating constantly with these people. And the other one is Michael Fritz. So he decided in this way that he would give out his name. So he's not anonymous anymore. And you can decide as a reviewer for this journal if you want to be anonymous or not. Then Stephanie posted the comment in reply to the reviews. So review 1 and review 2. And then I get all these information. And then I have this further continued conversation with Stephanie, the first author of the paper, because I see here reconsider after major revision. So I basically give her more work to do because I went to her paper again after all these comments and made another review. This is what I wrote up here. So basically I provided another expert review. So after these two reviews, I had further issues. For example, I asked here to clarify cation, anion, nomenclature or format issues. So this is something that the reviewers didn't pick up. So I wanted it to change. She picked it up and cleaned it. And then finally, after she revised it, so again, I have some small issues here. For example, the labeling of the figures and tables. And at the end, peer review completions, it's published. And as you can see, this is a very time-consuming and it should be a very thorough process. It takes time. In this example, it was very successful. So it's a nice paper that was a result of the peer review, and there was no trouble with it in terms of, a rejected paper or so, or a difference between the two reviewers. They were very much in common. Yeah, some final words about plagiarism. I would like to explain here how the journals avoid or try to detect plagiarism. And this is again from the Journal of the Cryosphere, the one that I showed you now with the example of Stephanie's paper. This journal does an automatic plagiarism detection. So this is important for you to know because as an editor, I get the results of the plagiarism check. So this Copernicus publication is a member of Similarity Check. And I will show you now what it means, but it means to you that you have to avoid plagiarism. So what this Similarity Check does, you submit your paper, let's say to one of the journals of the European Geoscience Union. So you submit the paper and they push it through this process, to this Similarity Check. And this Similarity Check checks your work basically against a database of millions of published scholarly work. So basically machine learning is applied to your work to check if somebody else or even yourself has had similar wordings as in your paper. So remember this, you have a database of millions of published scholarly articles and billions of web pages. So this is all used against your paper to check. As an editor, I get this report together with this initial paper, and it tells me how much % of your paper was found worldwide in other papers. So if you just copy paste from a different paper, I will see this as an editor. And I probably then have to ask you if you copied and pasted it, or if this work is original. So this helps me as an editor to evaluate your publication, if this is novel, if this is original work, or if you have submitted it somewhere else, for example. Most of these journals will use this process, and you should be aware of it. This is the iThenticate. This is this, I guess, this tool which the big journals use. For example, also Nature uses it, Wiley uses it. So remember, when you submit your article to one of these journals or also to other journals, they probably use this tool, and they will come back to you if they find similarities. Yeah, I also found this plagiarism checker. This is for free, available online. I've tested it, and yeah, I came up with some things, but yeah, really the way forward is here to avoid plagiarism by citing properly. And this is something we will talk about in a different lecture. So finally, the plagiarism has become very important. My advice to you is make sure you're not plagiarizing others' work. Make sure you're not plagiarizing your own work. This also includes, for example, papers that you have published before. You cannot reuse that material in a new paper. This is also considered plagiarism. Reference properly and perform the similarity check. So many journals will do this automatically for you now.